66 million years ago, an asteroid as big as Mount Everest was headed on a deadly collision course with Earth. The impact was so devastating that it wiped out the most gigantic, deadliest reptiles to ever roam our planet. But the dinosaurs didn't just die from one big boom. No, they faced a slow, agonizing end. How did this extinction event cause the largest tsunami Earth has ever seen? And what exactly happened after the big reptiles were gone? Hold on tight, we're taking you on the most epic and deadly trip of your life. This dinosaur-ending asteroid is terrifying. Not only was it about 10 kilometers in diameter, but it also traveled incredibly fast, between 10 and 30 kilometers per second. At this point, it was a blazing fireball. As it hurtled down to Earth, the air in front of it was compressing and heating up to unimaginably hot temperatures. Just before the impact, the asteroid could have been as hot as the surface of the sun. Once it entered our atmosphere, it only took this massive space rock a few seconds to reach Earth's surface and alter the course of life forever. As the asteroid slammed into Earth off the coast of where Mexico is now, it sent huge amounts of debris up into the air. The shocking blast wave killed everything in its way. And from here, it was only getting worse. This powerful blast ejected bits of the Earth's surface into the atmosphere. And minutes later, scorching hot pieces of glass and rock rained back down. Some of the debris reacted with the atmosphere, causing acid rain that would last for years. The land was burning. The fires caused by this devastating impact spread across the continent like literal wildfire, killing more and more life along the way. And then, just when you thought the apocalyptic scenario couldn't get any more intense, well, it did. The impact of the asteroid hitting Earth was so powerful that it sent shockwaves through the planet. And all that energy had to go somewhere. Cue the mega tsunami. A wall of water over 10 meters high raced across the ocean. This wasn't your regular tsunami. It was a staggering 30,000 times more powerful than anything you see today. As this monstrous wave spread across the North Atlantic and South Pacific, coastlines didn't stand a chance. The wave hit with such force that it destroyed and reshaped the continent. If you were there to witness this apocalyptic destruction, well, you wouldn't survive any of it. But some dinosaurs did. Yeah, the ones further away from ground zero weren't immediately obliterated by the impact. They weren't incinerated by the resulting infernos, and they managed to avoid being swept away by the mega tsunami. But still, their fate was sealed. As the dust began to settle, it was the start of a nuclear winter. Even though it wasn't nuclear weapons that caused it, the effect was the same. The massive amount of debris in the air blocked the sunlight for months, maybe even years. Earth suddenly became a cold, dark place, and the dinos weren't ready for it. As temperatures plummeted and fires released enormous amounts of greenhouse gases, the climate changed dramatically. Plants weren't able to perform photosynthesis, and most of them started to die out. This disrupted the food chain and starved many of the animals that survived the impact. And remember the acid rain? It lasted for several years, causing more devastation to the ecosystems. The oceans became too acidic for marine life. Most ocean species didn't have the time to adapt to such a drastic change. These prolonged harsh conditions, together with the initial blast, pushed about 75% of Earth's life to extinction. The good news is that this included the horrifying T-Rex. Yeah, as much as I feel bad for this guy, I'm happy he's not running around today. When the last of the dinosaurs breathed their last breath, Earth became an empty, devastated place, cold and acidic. So when did things get back to normal? Yeah, well, here's the thing. They didn't. Not dinosaur-era normal, anyway. Earth didn't rebuild after that. It reinvented itself. 1,000 years later, the planet was recovering from the post-apocalyptic winter. It was still cold and food was still scarce, but life was ready to make a comeback. In this new wild world, a few furry little critters were sprinting around. Among the first plants to reappear after the impact were ferns. They really hit it off well after the disaster. 100,000 years later, Earth began to get a little more lively. Creatures about the size of raccoons were repopulating the continents, and the oceans were once again teeming with life. Fast forward about 10 million years, and Earth had finally restored its biodiversity. Only it wasn't the same Earth as it used to be. Now it was the age of mammals. Yeah, after the dinosaurs checked out, mammals were on fire. Yeah, not literally, of course. Mammals, together with birds and flowering plants, were rocking the planet. Yeah, Earth never got back to its old self. After the last dinosaur died, it took our planet millions of years to bounce back in a new way. But don't get me wrong, this world was still pretty terrifying. It had beasts like Paraceratherium roaming the land and megalodons raining terror in the oceans. Yeah, it's really for the best that most of these creatures aren't around these days. You wouldn't want to face a meg when you're out there swimming in the ocean. In the past few billion years, Earth has been pummeled by asteroids, crashed into other planets, and frozen over several times. Not to mention being ruled by all kinds of crazy life forms. Sometimes it's a wonder that our blue homeworld has survived it all. But if we want to take a whirlwind tour of our planet's history, we'll have to start way back at the very beginning. Some 4.5 billion years ago, our solar system began to emerge out of a dense cloud of interstellar gas and dust. This cloud collapsed into a swirling disk of matter that got hotter and hotter and hotter until hydrogen fused into helium. And just like that, our sun was born. And baby Earth was on its way too. After the birth of our star, all the matter on the farthest ends of the spinning disk began to clump together. These clumps would be the seedlings for the planets and moons in our solar system. As they accumulated more matter, they grew bigger and more spherical. The clumps in the cooler regions of the solar system were mostly made of ice, liquids, and gases. Closer to the sun, all the rocky material formed the inner planets like Mars and Earth. This young Earth was incredibly active, volcanically speaking. It spewed out gases like hydrogen sulfide, methane, and carbon dioxide. These gases made up the very first atmosphere on our planet. Early Earth was constantly bombarded by large asteroids and comets, and soon Earth experienced an even more violent collision. Theia, a planet the size of Mars, slammed right into our young world. This epic collision threw chunks of matter all around Earth's orbit, and then gravity bound them together into what we know now as the Moon. On this hot, early Earth, there were no oceans. All water existed as gas. But 3.8 billion years ago, our planet cooled enough for water to condensate and become liquid. The very first primitive ocean covered this young Earth and turned it into a water world. H2O is an essential ingredient for creating living things, so with all that water, life appeared on Earth about 3.7 billion years ago. These earliest forms of life were microscopic organisms, but it was nearly a billion years after that that some of these organisms changed the course of the world. Earth didn't stay as a water world very long. Soon, the very first continents emerged from the ancient ocean. Scientists call them cratons. As more and more land rose from the ocean, the very first supercontinent appeared on the planet. Valbara wasn't exactly a supercontinent, it was pretty small. Scientists think it was smaller than the continent of Australia. Around 2.4 billion years ago, cyanobacteria evolved to become our planet's first photosynthesizers. Finally, we had some oxygen producers to make Earth's atmosphere much more hospitable. And the rest is history, folks. Just kidding, we've still got a long way to go. With all this new oxygen, Earth's atmosphere had much lower levels of carbon dioxide. And that made the planet icy cold. Much of our young world froze over as Earth saw its first ice age. Now, as Earth's atmosphere was changing, the continents were moving too. They broke up and reassembled into the next supercontinent, Rodinia. Rodinia was a real supercontinent. It may have been the largest supercontinent to ever cover the planet. And life? Well, life finally became more complex. But then something happened. Rodinia broke apart and a new supercontinent assembled. This one was called Pannotia. Then, between about 540 and 485 million years ago, there was an explosion of new life. This time was called the Cambrian explosion, and the animals that evolved during this period had hard body parts, like shells or spines. The most famous of all were the alien-looking trilobites. Around 440 million years ago, the climate suddenly shifted and the temperature of the ocean changed dramatically. Earth saw its first mass extinction event. This was the Ordovician-Silurian extinction, and a majority of the life that had been spreading around the planet vanished. Many of these life forms laid the foundation for the ecosystems that we have on Earth today. Somewhere between 420 to 350 million years ago, the first trees arose from Earth's soil. And the first animals made their way to land, too. 250 million years ago, the planet was covered by our last vast supercontinent, Pangaea. Sadly, it was also during this period that Earth witnessed the greatest mass extinction event in our history, the Great Dying. Huge amounts of greenhouse gases and accelerated global warming wiped out about 90% of all species on Earth. But this mass extinction helped pave the way for the next wave of animals to evolve. 240 to 230 million years ago, the first dinosaurs appeared. For the next 150 million years, they'd rule the land. If you were there, you'd have witnessed the gigantic sauropod Argentinosaurus, the largest land animal ever. Or you might have been chased by one of the Earth's greatest apex predators, the T-Rex. And you'd also witnessed Pangaea breaking up and forming the continents we know today. Okay, you may already know where this is headed. 66 million years ago, an asteroid slammed into our planet, right where Mexico sits now. And it coughed up so much debris into the atmosphere that it blocked out the sun. This led to devastating climate changes that caused the dinosaurs to die out. In the next wave of emerging animals, mammals became more common. Around 6 million years ago, the earliest known humans started walking this world. This species was called Sahelanthropus, though they still likely walked on all fours. 4 million years ago, early humans began to walk upright, and about 1 million years later, they developed the first known tools, which they used to break things. Some 800,000 years ago, things sparked. These early humans discovered how to control fire and could now cook food and provide themselves with heat. Their brains continued to evolve, now more rapidly than ever. These humans learned to interact with each other and the surrounding world in whole new ways. Then, between 40,000 to 15,000 years ago, all other human species besides Homo sapiens went extinct. 10,000 years ago, Earth saw its earliest farmers. These previously nomadic humans stopped wandering the planet and finally put down their roots. Jumping way forward to about 250 years ago, the Industrial Revolution took place. We went through major technological, socioeconomic, and cultural transformations. Rural-based farm societies became more industrialized urban ones. Our human population continued to grow. By 1804, we reached 1 billion. By 1927, we'd hit 2 billion. And since the 1960s, the global population has risen faster and faster to where it is now, at over 8 billion people. And now there's a new threat to human existence and many other forms of life here on Earth: climate change. Temperatures and sea levels are rising worldwide, and biodiversity is declining. We could be on the verge of another mass extinction event if things don't change. Millions of years ago, Earth looked very different. All the continents were fused into one, teeming with life, both beautiful and terrifying. When you think of prehistoric times, you might picture a T-Rex rampaging through the jungle with its razor-sharp teeth. But even before the dinosaurs, there were other giant creatures ruling the Earth. Yeah, welcome to the Permian period. This epoch started 300 million years ago. Back then, our planet had one supercontinent, Pangaea, surrounded by a world ocean called Panthalassa. The Permian period began at the end of an ice age when temperatures were much cooler than today. Then, during early Permian days, Earth warmed to a lush environment with a diversity of plants and a rapid evolution of insect and animal life. Only, as you probably know, everything is ever-changing on our blue marble. Over the next 50 million years, Earth kept growing hotter and drier. Eventually, the most deadly event in the history of our planet wiped out nearly everything that ever lived here. Scientists call this event the Great Dying, and it was the most catastrophic mass extinction event the Earth has ever seen. And the Earth has seen 5 of them. But before we get to all this doom and gloom, let me take you on an epic journey back in time. Here in the Permian period, some of the most incredible species that roamed our young planet are about to emerge. If you could time travel nearly 300 million years into the past, you'd land smack dab in the middle of the supercontinent Pangaea. Earth's smaller continents would have just finished colliding with each other to form this enormous landmass, taking up 1/3 of the planet's surface. There was likely less oxygen in the air than there is now, but you still might be able to breathe. Oh, and bring a jacket because it would likely be chilly, with some areas averaging no more than a brisk 4 degrees Celsius. But don't worry, things will soon start heating up. By the end of the early Permian, the Ice Age was on its way out and Pangaea was becoming a lush world. Plants and animals started to thrive. This was a volcanic world. Violent eruptions changed the climate, shaped the landscape, and paved the way for evolution. When giant swamp forests began drying out, plant life had to adapt, and so 290 million years ago, Earth saw the very first seed-bearing plants called gymnosperms. These plants carried seeds on their cones, and they spread across the supercontinent like wildfire. The ancient evergreen forest of the early Permian was hiding something familiar. Just like today, you could find cicadas and beetles piercing and sucking on the plants, and the cutest of them all? Cockroaches. Only, these weren't the cockroaches you know today. These prehistoric vermin were gigantic, the size of birds. But despite their size, cockroaches never ruled prehistoric land, and that's good news, am I right? No, something much more fascinating was roaming Pangaea. The now extinct ancestor of primitive mammals, Dimetrodon. This animal was as fascinating as it was terrifying. Encountering a Dimetrodon would be quite a sight to behold. This ancient lizard grew to 5 meters long and weighed 225 kilograms. It had a large sail running down its spine. Scientists think this sail helped the reptile regulate its body temperature, soaking up warmth during the daytime and dissipating excess heat during the cooler nights. It would walk toward you like a crocodile and act like a total menace. Dimetrodon was an apex predator of its time. Watch out for a mix of sharp and flat teeth that would slice you open and grind you up. In the Middle Permian period, other mammal-like reptiles took over the planet. Therapsids. They had strong jaws with sharp teeth and a somewhat upright stance thanks to their legs being situated underneath their bodies. Therapsid reptiles varied from the 5-meter-long, likely omnivorous Deuterosaurus to the 5 times smaller, meat-eating Lycanops. You could meet plenty more therapsids if you stuck around for another 20 million years. During the Middle Permian period, Earth kept getting hotter. The average global temperature on Pangaea grew to about 25 degrees Celsius, and volcanoes were spitting greenhouse gases out into the atmosphere. Due to the changing climate, sea levels were shifting, but marine life found ways to thrive. If you were to take a dip in the prehistoric superocean, you'd be swimming alongside ancient sharks and bony primitive fish. Many more complex marine species came and went as the environment kept changing. In the late Permian period, you could have a friendly encounter with another reptile, Lystrosaurus. These looked like a cross between a lizard and a pig, but unlike all the scary prehistoric monsters out there, Lystrosaurus was a herbivore. It was just 1 meter long and had powerful front legs for burrowing. Soon, another cute mammal-like lizard evolved, the cynodont. The cynodont looked like a giant rodent. It was about 1 meter long, had whiskers, and fed on small animals and insects. Now, during this time, something bad was brewing in the air. A large amount of volcanic activity was displacing oxygen from the atmosphere. Scientists think there was as little as 10% oxygen in the air. Compare that to 21% today. You'd have a hard time breathing in that environment. And the temperature kept rising and rising. With an average temperature of about 28 degrees Celsius, this lush prehistoric world was turning into an oven. All good things must come to an end, and sadly, this period came to a particularly brutal one. About 252 million years ago, about 90% of all plant and animal life was wiped out. This tragic moment is called the Great Dying, and it was Earth's most devastating mass extinction event. Scientists still debate what caused this catastrophic extinction. Most theories suggest it was the result of explosive volcanic activity. As huge volcanic eruptions swept the continent, massive amounts of ash were unleashed into the atmosphere. So much ash that it blocked out most, if not all, of the incoming sunlight. And with no sunlight, global temperatures dropped suddenly. Plants couldn't perform their photosynthetic processes and died off. And without plants, the very basis of their food chain, animals soon followed. Things got worse before they got better. Because of all the carbon dioxide emitted during the volcanic eruptions, global temperatures rose again. And not just to where they were, but higher, much higher. And this caused the superocean to lose most of its oxygen. And unable to breathe, a majority of the Permian sea animals perished. Eventually, over 95% of marine species and more than 70% of land animals became extinct. Welcome to the Permian period, an ancient time full of life, but also death. The Permian was home to the largest mass extinction event in Earth's history, even bigger than what wiped out the dinosaurs. Nearly all life was brought to an end. But how did this extinction event come about in the first place? And what kind of life did end up surviving? This is What If, and here's what would happen if you lived in the Permian period. The Permian period lasted almost 50 million years, from 299 to 252 million years ago. You can divide it into three parts: early, middle, and late. And we're going to walk you through all three of them. Let's start, obviously, in the early Permian. This period saw the birth of some of the earliest four-legged creatures. They're all extinct now, but they were the forefathers to dinosaurs and later mammals. They were massive predators that you definitely want to stay away from. On land, the apex predators were the synapsid. This species ruled the land before dinosaurs took their place. They're often referred to as mammal-like reptiles, and they look like a mix between a dog and a lizard. They also had incredibly thick skin, which retained a lot of moisture. This allowed them to thrive in the increasingly dry environment. The most famous synapsid, and one you would definitely not want to encounter, is the Dimetrodon. Over 3.5 meters long, this carnivorous predator had a large sail on its back. Since it was cold-blooded, it needed something to regulate its temperature. Maybe this sail-like appendage did the job. It helped the Dimetrodon heat up and cool down depending on the temperature. These beasts were also equipped with an incredibly scary mouthful of teeth that were all different sizes. Another animal you'll have to worry about? Gorgonopsians. These were carnivores with saber-toothed fangs. They remind me a lot of Siberian tigers. Some scientists have described them as the T-Rex of their time. They were frightening predators that could destroy anything in their path. And their favorite food? Dicynodonts. That name literally means two dog teeth. Thankfully, if you encountered one, you wouldn't need to be afraid because they might become your lunch. Yeah, these synapsids were herbivores, and they came in all different sizes. They could be small, like a pet dog, or as big as a cow. Dicynodonts looked like the love child of mammals, reptiles, and birds. They had the skull of a turtle, the beak of a bird, and even tusks to dig food out of the ground. Dicynodonts in the Permian era were cold-blooded, but during the Triassic period that followed, varieties evolved to become more like mammals, with features that helped keep them warm. Now, amazingly, these creatures survived the catastrophe that we'll get to later on, which is a good thing because otherwise, humans wouldn't have evolved. We'll get back to what creatures you'd come across in the Permian in a bit, but for now, let's talk about where they lived. Okay, during this period, if you looked down on Earth from high up in space, you'd see that the land was made up of just one supercontinent. It was called Pangaea. It was formed by the collision of two large continents, Gondwana and Euramerica. The formation of this single large landmass had a massive impact on the climate. But before we get to that, let's look at how today's continents mapped into this supercontinent. Pangaea looked a bit like a giant crescent. The top curve of the crescent would later break apart to form Europe and Asia. The main body of the crescent contained North America, South America, and Africa. And the bottom, well, it would later separate to form India, Antarctica, and Australia. The crescent curved to contain what was called the Tethys Ocean. In the rest of Earth, well, it was all one giant body of water called the Panthalassic Ocean. Okay, so far so good. Yeah, you don't have the choice of 7 continents to live on, but you could set up camp anywhere on Pangaea. Maybe you'd enjoy a spot on the beach. But here's the important question. Are you gonna freeze to death? Or would you just bake? Well, this would depend on when you get there and where you land. At the beginning of the Permian, Earth was actually in an ice age. Hope you packed a parka. If you set foot on the southern region of Pangaea, you'd find tons of glaciers, or literally gigatons of glaciers. These could be found in what is now southern India, Australia, and Antarctica. Now, due to this giant landmass, the weather will be vastly different from what you're used to today. In our current world, the oceans do an amazing job at absorbing heat. They also warm up and cool down slowly, affecting the temperatures on land. But on this supercontinent, the interior land was far from water, so temperatures in this area are much more extreme. In the middle Permian, you'd enjoy a climate that's warmer, milder, and moist. The glaciers have now receded. Inland, Pangaea is arid, and according to the Pangaean mega monsoon theory, there were extreme seasonal fluctuations. You'd be hit with wet and dry periods throughout the year. With further increases in temperature, the late Permian would be very dry, with some alternating warm and cool periods. Now, what about the atmosphere? Was there enough oxygen for you to survive? Well, at the beginning of the Permian, oxygen concentration was actually pretty high, 30%. This is because of what had happened on Earth during the previous Carboniferous period. Forests had covered the Earth, creating an oxygen-rich atmosphere. Now, you might enjoy this extra boost of oxygen. You'd feel more energized and lively. Living in the mountains would be much more comfortable because the thinner air would now be offset by the higher oxygen concentration. But as good as oxygen is, you can't breathe it for too long at this concentration. Over time, you'd overdose and get oxygen toxicity. You could have difficulty breathing, and in severe cases, you might have a seizure and die. But high oxygen levels didn't last the whole time. There was a big drop toward the end. But before we get to that, you're probably wondering, what is there around here to eat? Well, as temperatures rose during the Permian, plant life began to take off. But unfortunately, there wouldn't be many options for you on the menu. In the early Permian, there were polar tundra regions as well as tropical swamp forests. Now, as the climate became more dry, the swamp forests dried out and water-loving plants shrank to become shrubs. So, unless you had the jaws and stomach of a cow or 4 stomachs of a cow, eating these dry shrubs wouldn't have been too much fun to chomp on. And unfortunately, these shrubs were all shrub, no berry. There were no fruits at this time. They didn't really evolve till the Jurassic, so you'd probably be at risk of getting scurvy. But there was plenty of one thing: ferns. Ferns were the dominant plant life. Maybe you could eat some tender fern leaves and make some tea out of tree bark. It's no whopper value meal, but it'll do, I guess. Some of these plants would have been dangerous too. You wouldn't be accustomed to them, and they might cause some sort of deadly allergic reaction. But nasty plants weren't your only option for food. Why don't you try a nasty insect instead? The increased growth of plant life during this time provided a haven for insects. Bugs with sucking mouth parts made their debut during the Permian. You'd also see massive dragonflies roaming about. Maybe try to catch one of those. I wonder if they taste like chicken. You'd also notice that these insects are massive. In the early Permian, the large insects from the previous Carboniferous era were still around. By the middle Permian, these giant insects had disappeared. What was left were smaller insects that are still around today in some form. But forget these gross plants and insects. Where are the animals we could eat? Well, you wouldn't want to target the scary Dimetrodon or the Gorgonopsian that we met earlier. Some grilled herbivorous Dicynodont would be nice. It's no Popeye's Spicy Chicken Deluxe, but it just might hit the spot. Now, on the smaller side of creatures, there were the Varanopids. These were small lizard-like creatures that mainly dined on insects. Another super important group during the Permian was the Sauropsids. These were basically reptiles. During the Permian period, when synapsids dominated, the Sauropsids remained small and lizard-like, but they'd make a fiery comeback later on. I don't know about you, but these animals are either looking scary or unappetizing, and I'm not really in the mood to eat a cross between a lizard and a dog. Can you catch some fish? Maybe a fillet of fish? Permian seas were full of bony fish, which had two features: fan-shaped fins and thick scales. There were also creatures with coiled spiral shells called ammonoids that lived in the water. Again, it's no ultimate endless shrimp, but a seafood diet might be your best bet. Now, if you go for a dip, watch out. You'll want to steer clear of the scary Gaiasia geniae, a salamander-like creature with deadly fangs and a 2-foot-long skull. This creature was way bigger than you. It was 2.5 meters long. Scientists describe its head as being like a toilet seat, which opened up to suck in its prey. The good news? It was sluggish, so if you're a fast swimmer, maybe you can escape it. But not everything thrived during this time. As you reach the late Permian, you'll notice things changing. Creatures all around the planet are going extinct in what's known as the Great Dying. This was Earth's biggest mass extinction event. 90% of marine life and 70% of all animal and plant life died out. Now, scientists still aren't completely sure what caused this mass extinction, but there are several theories. One of the leading theories is that a series of natural disasters is what got the whole thing going. Volcanoes. Toward the end of the Permian period, there were massive volcanic eruptions in what's now Siberia, and not just for a few years or decades, for about 600,000 years. Huge flows of lava flooded the region, but it wasn't the lava that caused the extinction. It was the volcanic gases that were being spewed into the air. This caused an increased concentration of sulfur dioxide in Earth's atmosphere. What happened next? Acid rain. Volcanic ash was also thrown up in the sky, blocking the sun, making it dark out, also causing the temperature to fall. As a result, plants found it harder to photosynthesize, and the food chain was disrupted. The extinction of plant life, then herbivores, and then carnivores followed. It was like a set of dominoes falling. But it wasn't just the food chain. It was literally becoming harder to breathe because the impact to plants also had major effects on the atmosphere. With the disruption to photosynthesis, carbon dioxide increased while oxygen levels plummeted to 16%. Animals that had evolved in a more oxygen-rich atmosphere weren't ready for this drop in oxygen and then died off. If you were there, it would be like trying to breathe at the top of a giant mountain today. Now, as this was happening, animals living at higher altitudes suddenly found the oxygen too thin for their requirements, so they probably moved to lower altitudes and had to compete with other species. Some scientists believe that this is what drove land-based extinctions. Oxygen levels were so low that animals had to remain where the air was most dense, at sea level. Even the slightest climb to a higher altitude would have them gasping for breath. And the rising carbon dioxide also created a greenhouse effect, causing temperatures to rise. This made the oceans warmer as well, which killed a ton of marine life. The rising temperature plus the reduced oxygen equaled a horrible world for all life on Earth, making it nearly impossible to survive. But there's a third theory. Initially, scientists estimated that the Great Dying took place over millions of years, but more recent archaeological evidence indicates that it happened much faster, maybe between 8,000 and 100,000 years. Could something else have happened that caused an abrupt end to these creatures? Yeah, some scientists think there's another culprit, an asteroid. In addition to all these erupting volcanoes, scientists have also found evidence of an asteroid collision. This asteroid may have been 6 to 12 kilometers wide. That's bigger than Mount Everest. So maybe it's a mix of all of them. The volcanic eruptions, the atmospheric effects, and then wham, a massive asteroid as the final nail in the coffin. You combine all three of these events and you've got yourself the Earth's largest mass extinction. But not all creatures died off. Some of the lucky ones managed to survive. The Dicynodonts later evolved into rodent-like creatures. They lived side by side with the dinosaurs. Sure, they weren't the top of the food chain, but it beats going extinct. They even outlasted the dinosaurs, evolving into present-day mammals. Small sharks migrated to the depths of the ocean, avoiding the acidic coastal waters, and they're still around today. The sauropsid reptiles also survived. Small lizards had a better chance of surviving compared to the big synapsids. Being cold-blooded and sluggish were excellent survival traits. In the coming Triassic and Jurassic periods, they evolved into mighty dinosaurs. It was once assumed that most trees went extinct during the Great Dying too, but scientists continue to find plant species that survived that time. Life, whether it's microorganisms, plants, or animals, is resilient and it always finds a way. Over 300 million years ago, before the age of giant dinosaurs, Earth was covered with giant insects. Imagine a world where dragonflies are the size of crows and millipedes are as long as cars. Welcome to the Carboniferous period. Why were insects so enormous during this time? What did oxygen have to do with it? And why did these insects go extinct? This is What If, and here's what the Earth looked like in the age of giant insects. The Carboniferous period was one of the most transformational periods in the history of Earth. The planet's land masses were beginning to form the supercontinent of Pangaea. Extensive swamps and warm, humid forests dominated the landscape. And giant insects weren't the only huge creatures roaming the planet. There was also a vast array of marine life, like early forms of sharks and a giant amphibian that would reach up to 6 feet long. Now, enough talking. Let's travel back in time, 300 million years ago, and dive into the Carboniferous age. Now, the first thing you'd probably notice would be the giant insect-like creatures. One of the most iconic was the Meganeura. This insect resembled a modern-day dragonfly, except with a major twist. It had a wingspan of up to 75 centimeters. Yeah, Scarier than that, though, it was carnivorous, hunting down other insects and small amphibians. Hopefully it doesn't come for you. So that thing is in the sky, but on land, you'll have the Arthropleura. This millipede-like creature could grow up to 2.5 meters long. Luckily, it wouldn't go after you. It preferred munching on decomposing vegetation. Hey, before we talk more about these giant insects, there's another giant issue we need to worry about, and that's our planet's ecosystems and how important it is to help them. Stick around till the end of this video to check out an inspiring project from the folks over at Planet Wild. Another creepy-looking insect was the Pulmonoscorpius. This was a giant scorpion that mostly roamed the swampier areas of Earth. They could grow 70 centimeters long. There were also giant cockroaches that grew to 10 centimeters and mayflies with 45-centimeter wingspans. So it's safe to say that you'd have a lot to watch out for when you're wandering around in this period, but the question is, how did these insects get so big anyway? Well, you may have noticed as you've been hanging around in the Carboniferous age, you feel a lot more energetic and alert. Maybe you've had an easier time running around. This has to do with the oxygen levels in your current world. Research has estimated that the atmospheric oxygen levels were as high as 35% during this period. Compare that to the 21% we breathe today. Oxygen was one of the key factors in the gigantism found in insects at the time. But why would this make them so giant? Insects breathe differently from other creatures. Insects don't have a circulatory system to transport oxygen. Instead, it gets delivered directly to their tissues through a network of tiny tubes called the trachea. And the more oxygen in the atmosphere, the bigger these insects are. But there might be more reasons why the insects grew to this size. Another theory suggests that the insects were forced to grow so large due to oxygen toxicity. Yeah, as amazing as oxygen is, you can have too much of a good thing. Too much oxygen in your body can create what's known as free radicals. These are unstable molecules that can damage your cells and even damage your DNA. In the case of our insects, they were forced to grow this big. Otherwise, they'd suffer oxygen toxicity. Growing larger would slow down the rate of oxygen absorption, making it harder to suffer from too much oxygen. And the same could happen to you. The longer you hang out in this period, the higher oxygen levels will cause you to experience nausea, respiratory issues, and even some effects on your nervous system. Now, insects were arguably the stars of this age, but they weren't the only things to experience massive change during the Carboniferous period. This time was known as the Coal Age. That's because of the extensive coal beds that formed after ancient forests decayed. These coal beds are one of our main sources of energy. We're still using them today. And a lot of the fruits and veggies you find in the grocery store may be descendants of plants from over 300 million years ago. The Carboniferous period saw the evolution of the first seed-bearing plants, creating more diverse ecosystems than we'd ever seen before. Wait, what's that over there? Kinda looks like a dinosaur. Oh, hey, little guy. Turns out this wasn't a dino, just one of the first reptiles to ever appear. But if you stick around a couple of million more years, we'll enter the Mesozoic era, which was known as the Age of Dinosaurs. Speaking of change, the atmosphere was another part of Earth that evolved during this period. Earth had a lush, greenhouse-like climate when you first arrived, warm and humid temperatures to support the swampy forests we've been mucking about. But as the period progressed over millions of years, the climate transitioned to what's known as an icehouse Earth state. The temperature would get significantly lower and ice sheets would begin to form, mainly in the southern hemisphere. But why did this happen? Well, as we've been exploring this crazy period, Earth's land masses have been slowly coming together to form a supercontinent known as Pangaea. And when land masses this big start to move, it can seriously affect ocean currents, wind patterns, and global climate. Now, the rainforests have collapsed, which has led to a decline in the fauna and vegetation that were previously booming. And with the rainforests in decline, well, that means oxygen levels are being reduced. Before you know it, our massive insects start dying and going extinct. Without the higher levels of oxygen available to support their size, well, these giant insects can't survive. The lower oxygen levels and a drier climate have created a habitat better suited for smaller insects. Also happening at this point, early reptiles are starting to take over, making the landscape way more difficult for the insects. If you traveled 250 million years into the past, you'd be witnessing the dawn of dinosaurs. One of the leading theories is that dinosaurs evolved from a species known as archosaurs. These were the dominant reptiles that appeared during the late Permian period. To some, they may even look like dinosaurs, and that's because they were ancestors to these incredible creatures. Over time, the archosaurs split up into two groups. One of these groups led to crocodiles, and the other led to dinosaurs, which continued evolving into thousands of different species. One of the main traits they eventually gained was their bipedal abilities. Early dinosaurs began to walk on two legs, freeing their front limbs for other uses like grabbing food and defending themselves. And that's just the start of their evolutionary journey. Let's travel back in time, 250 million years ago, and witness the history of dinosaurs in 10 minutes. Triassic period. As you enter this new era, you'll notice that the dinosaurs running around look pretty different from what you're used to seeing. One of the earliest dinosaurs that emerged from the archosaurs was the Eoraptor. This little guy was about the size of a dog, barely 1 meter tall and weighing in at a meager 10 kilograms. You know, we typically think of dinosaurs as these massive creatures, but it'd be a couple million more years before that started to happen. We'll check in to see how those dinos are growing in size as we travel through time. But for now, let's see what's happening to Earth. During the Triassic period, the supercontinent Pangaea starts to fragment, slowly altering global climates and ecosystems. The climate was generally hot and dry, and there were no polar ice caps, creating a stark contrast to what you're typically used to in modern-day Earth. The vegetation was also very different and was crucial for the survival and evolution of dinosaurs. The plants have different characteristics as well. Some are tough, some nutritious, and others potentially poisonous. Each one of them will influence the dietary and adaptive strategies of different dinosaur species. Speaking of which, what are some other dinosaurs doing during this time? Weighing in at about 23 kilograms and 1 meter tall, we have the Coelophysis. It was a little bit bigger than the Eoraptor, but that didn't stop it from being a fast and agile predator that likely preyed on smaller animals. Now, the Herrerasaurus was slightly taller at about 1.1 meters, but was a lot heavier at about 350 kilograms. Then we have the Plateosaurus. Now, this guy is way bigger than me. It stood tall at about 3 meters and weighed up to 4,000 kilograms. This was one of the earliest examples of how big dinosaurs could grow. But wait, they get even bigger than this. Despite their impressive forms, dinosaurs weren't the dominant creatures during the Triassic. They had to share their environments with many other organisms, all vying for survival in the diverse ecosystems. This was the case until the Triassic period would experience a great extinction event. This was likely caused by massive volcanic activity, climate change, and potentially even some small asteroid impacts. This will have a significant effect on life on Earth and lead to the extinction of numerous species. But it wasn't all bad, especially for our dinosaurs. This moment set the stage to bring new opportunities to these species. leading to them dominating the Earth. Jurassic period. Now, instead of dinosaurs simply surviving, this is where they thrive. Over the millions of years, different species have been evolving, and dinosaurs are now the rulers of the Earth. They spread across continents, dominating the lush forests and arid deserts. Occupying these areas were some massive dinosaurs, ones that you're probably a lot more familiar with. We have the Stegosaurus, Brachiosaurus, and Allosaurus. These were some of the largest creatures ever to walk the Earth. But you'd quickly notice that it wasn't just these massive beasts that were roaming around. This era also saw the evolution of theropods. These were smaller dinosaurs that had more of a bird-like form. One of the most famous was the Archaeopteryx. It was kind of like a mix between a dinosaur and a bird, with feathers and wings, but also with bony teeth and a tail. The Archaeopteryx was a crucial link between birds and dinosaurs. If you wait about 100 million more years, they'll evolve into the birds we know today. Oh, wait, is that a spoiler? After 56 million years, the Jurassic period comes to an end. This was after yet another extinction event happened. Luckily, this one is more minor. However, due to climate change, volcanic activity, and sea levels changing, some species are going extinct. This, once again, changes the landscape as the dinosaurs enter their final era. Cretaceous period. Okay, we've now entered the Cretaceous period, and as we've been traveling through these millions of years, you may have noticed something's missing. Right, one of the dinosaurs' biggest stars hasn't appeared yet. Say hello to the Tyrannosaurus Rex. The T-Rex was a massive beast. It was 3.7 meters tall and 12 meters long. Not only that, but it was a whopping 9 tons. Equipped with a powerful jaw and incredibly sharp teeth, the T-Rex dominated the Cretaceous kingdom. It was one of the most dominant predators history has ever seen. This colossal beast wasn't just scavenging leftovers, it was an active hunter, stalking its prey with keen eyesight and a heightened sense of smell. Among its favorite meals were the sizable herbivores like the Edmontosaurus. But the T-Rex didn't stop there. It would take on formidable opponents like the Triceratops and even other smaller theropods if the opportunity arose. With its powerful jaws filled with 12-inch teeth and its strong hind limbs that allowed it to run at speeds of up to 40 kilometers per hour, the T-Rex was a master of the hunt. But this period wasn't just filled with massive beasts like the T-Rex. Look around and you'll also notice even more feathered dinosaurs in the Cretaceous period. One of them being the Velociraptor. Now, you typically see them portrayed like this with no feathers, but evidence suggests that these creatures were quite feathered. Now, the feathers weren't necessarily used for flying, more for warmth and stability. And this one is the Microraptor. Now, unlike the Velociraptor, its feathers likely were used for flight, giving us crucial insight into the evolution of birds. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, Pangaea was breaking up and forming into the continents we know today. But because of this, some dinosaurs were forced to migrate and separate into different areas of the world. These dinosaurs had to adapt to their new environments, potentially changing the course of their evolution. But none of this matters when we consider what happens next. The cataclysmic event. Okay, as you've been hanging out with the dinosaurs for millions of years, an asteroid has been making its way toward Earth. Then suddenly, it hits, creating a massive crater 150 kilometers wide and 20 kilometers deep. Naturally, something this huge makes a devastating impact on the world, one that'll change it forever. The asteroid's collision is massive, but its impact is felt long after the initial crash. Due to the massive collision, the environment drastically changes. Significant drops in temperature start to occur, and debris from the crash begins to block out the sun. This impacts not only the dinosaurs' health, but also their food supply. This devastating event wipes out 75% of the Earth's species, many of which are the dinosaurs we've been observing this whole time. But don't worry, not all of the dinosaurs went extinct. The aviation-based dinosaurs we checked out earlier managed to survive the asteroid strike, eventually evolving into birds. Aftermath. Now that most of the dinosaurs are extinct, it's cleared the way for mammals to diversify and expand their impact on the world. With less competition, early mammals can now thrive and take over, which slowly, over time, allowed humans to evolve, building the world we know today. Dinosaurs went on to evolve for another 165 million years, but there's still so much we need to learn about them. 66 million years ago, a giant asteroid struck Earth, wiping out the dinosaurs and 75% of the other animals on Earth. Devastating, yeah, but this was millions of years ago. What if this asteroid were to collide with us today? Is there any chance we could stop it? What parts of the world would be most impacted? And why might this end up being a good thing? This is What If, and here's what would happen if the dinosaur-killing asteroid struck in 2024. Okay, let's see what kind of asteroid we're dealing with here. Known as the Chicxulub impactor, this asteroid was as wide as 100 to 200 football fields. That's 10 to 20 kilometers wide. And now it's coming directly toward us, specifically the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. If you think you can run away from this thing, yeah, no chance. It's hurtling toward Earth at 20 kilometers per second. Suddenly, it crashes into the sea, killing everything in the immediate vicinity. But that's not all. A thermal pulse radiates out from the blast site, releasing the energy equivalent of 10 billion nuclear bombs. Cue an enormous shockwave of air that destroys everything within 1,500 kilometers. Plants and animals are shredded, forests burn to the ground. A magnitude 10 earthquake would crack the earth open. Quakes would radiate throughout the United States. Massive tsunamis would rise. Mexico City, Florida, and Texas would all feel the effects. I know Texas has talked about seceding, but I don't think this is what they had in mind. Now, although there will still be life on Earth, it might not last much longer. Plumes of dust and sulfur in the atmosphere block the sun. For the next 15 years, it's a cold, dark, awful winter. Only a few of us will make it out alive. But maybe the humans that do survive will be able to rebuild Earth. And funny enough, that massive asteroid that caused all the damage, well, it might hold the key to a stable new future. If you want to see what I mean, let's head to the impact site. Some of the most valuable materials known to humans are scattered within this massive crater of destruction. This asteroid, like many others, contained one of the most essential elements for rebuilding our society: gold. Now, when most people think of gold, they think of it as a symbol of luxury and high status, but they don't understand why it's considered to be so valuable. Well, for starters, it's a key component we can use to rebuild our communications technology, energy infrastructure, and medical equipment. But more importantly, if traditional currency systems collapse after this disaster, it would help stabilize the global economy. Gold has been valued as a stable medium of exchange and store of value for millennia, especially during difficult times. Even in today's volatile market environment, gold remains one of the safest investments. With a 1-year return of 8.68% and a 5-year return of 54.95%, gold continues to show its resilience and capacity to protect investments against inflation, currency devaluation, and geopolitical risks. According to experts at Calibre Mining, a public company that produces gold listed in Canada on the TSX and in the US on the OTCQX, gold production remains underinvested despite its value. Let me explain. Calibre Mining leverages the stability of gold with the added potential of a high-growth company. They've proven value through delivering 28% year-over-year production growth and even a tenfold increase in their reserves since 2019. With 5 mines across the globe and the ability to self-fund exploration, well, Calibre is constantly drilling and finding more gold. They continue to grow and diversify their gold production with their new Canadian asset Valentine gearing up to come online next year. Now, despite that success, gold and gold production is a sector not getting much attention yet. But the price continues to rise, and well-known banks like Goldman Sachs predict higher prices. So you can see why having this giant deposit of gold in front of us is one of the most useful things we could ask for when rebuilding our society. And mining from it will continue to provide value and wealth for future generations. But for any of that to happen, we need to survive the asteroid in the first place. And luckily for us, it's not 66 million years ago. It's 2024, and we're Homo sapiens, creatures with really big brains and bright ideas. No offense to the T-Rex, but they definitely weren't getting Wordle in 2, and they definitely weren't tracking the sky for asteroids. But there's a team at NASA doing just that. And if we were able to spot an asteroid ahead of time, could we somehow steer it off course? Well, it's possible to deflect an asteroid from its path. Here's 5 different options we can explore. The first possibility is a kinetic impactor. This is the only deflection option scientists have tested so far. The idea behind it is to violently slam an object into the asteroid, pushing it off its path. NASA tested this technique in 2022 by slamming a spacecraft into Dimorphos. Dimorphos is the moon of a near-Earth asteroid, and thanks to the force of the collision, it's now going faster. So, in theory, we could use this option to move an asteroid off course. But there's a bit of a problem. The asteroid we're dealing with is way too big. In order to successfully knock it off course, we'd need multiple kinetic impactors. I'm not liking our chances with this one. Let's see what else we got. Okay, the second option for deflection is called a gravity tractor. Think of this like your dog pulling on its leash, taking you down a different path to smell something interesting. Minus the dog and the smell. Here, a spacecraft flies next to an asteroid, changing its path by the force of its gravity. Unfortunately, there's a big problem with this method. Well, for starters, it takes a really long time, and again, it only works on small asteroids, ones that are less than 500 meters in diameter. Yeah, this will be a no-go when it comes to the massive asteroid heading toward Earth. Okay, the third option is something known as an ion beam shepherd. But instead of herding goats, this shepherd is a spacecraft herding the asteroid out of our way. The spacecraft has an ion engine which generates an exhaust of accelerated xenon ions. These ions are super powerful charged particles, and the force of these charged particles deflects the asteroid. But probably not powerful enough to deflect a Chicxulub repeat. Okay, next up, space lasers. Now, if you're imagining zapping the entire asteroid with lasers so it vaporizes, no, that's not it. Unfortunately, it isn't as cool, but it can be effective. The laser is trained on the surface, creating plumes that push the asteroid away. And if we had enough lasers that were powerful enough, this might be a viable method. Finally, for a really big asteroid like the one we're dealing with here, and something's got to be done, there's always nukes. Now, this would be incredibly dangerous because there's always the possibility of fragments of the asteroid or other space debris falling on Earth. Not to mention, launching nukes in general is a super risky endeavor, but let's be real. An emergency like this probably justifies us unlocking the nuclear codes. Scientists tell us that sending a nuke that detonates next to an asteroid 2 months ahead of time could vaporize 99.9% of the asteroid's mass away from Earth. Sounds pretty good to me. Now, all of this only works if we spot the asteroid way ahead of time. If for some reason we don't, and an asteroid suddenly came out of nowhere, we'd have a mass evacuation. The evacuation zone would be determined based on the size, speed, and angle of the impending impact. Since it's hitting the Yucatan Peninsula, well, the US, Cuban, and Mexican governments would be busy evacuating people in Mexico, Cuba, and parts of the southern United States. The three governments would have to create alternative arrangements for food and shelter for hundreds of thousands of people, maybe more. Now, mass evacuation doesn't sound like a walk in the park, so is there any upside to having an asteroid land in our backyard? Well, yeah, there are amazing gifts the asteroid could bring us. A whole host of valuable minerals. Due to their highly inconvenient locations in deep space, like in the asteroid belt, these space rocks are extremely difficult to mine. But this would change if an asteroid landed on Earth. Just a single asteroid is estimated to contain a ridiculous amount of gold. 700 quintillion. That's enough zeros to give every person on Earth $93 billion. And there are other elements that we might be able to extract as well. Cobalt, platinum, nickel. In fact, the pressure with which the asteroid crashes can transform one element into a more valuable one. For instance, at a meteorite crash site in Australia, a rare mineral, rhyodite, was found. It was formed out of zircon as a result of the high pressure and temperature of the impact. And mining these elements from asteroids could free us from the human rights issues that have been part and parcel of traditional mining. Caliber mining follows ethical mining practices, but not every mining company does. In addition, mining asteroids would be more environmentally friendly, free of the danger of releasing toxins like lead and arsenic into our water. Today, large impact craters in South Africa and Canada are already being mined. They're rich sources of nickel and gold. The devastation from the crash of an asteroid would be horrific, but if it turns out it's unavoidable, that devastation may hold the clue to new resources and new growth.
It's the end of the world as you know it. Every human on Earth suddenly went extinct. And it's time for nature to make its ultimate comeback. What would happen to your home and your city? Why would this doom the planet to a nuclear meltdown? And would any trace of human existence manage to live on? This is What If, and here's what would happen if humans suddenly went extinct. Whether it was a global pandemic, a planet-wide volcanic event, or a gigantic space rock, we reached the end of the line for our species. Every single human on Earth is gone. For good. Now, while there's no hope for humanity to make a comeback, we'd be leaving behind a lot of stuff. Cities, highways, waste. Time to see just how long it would take for the last remaining traces of human life to disappear. The first week of life on Earth without humans would be tough for all the pets. Without you, your furry companions would need to get outside and find food for themselves. So hopefully you left a window open for them. Your peace lily would stand no chance. But that wouldn't be the only thing at stake with you gone for just 1 week. Soon, the world will become radioactive. The thing is, our nuclear plants produce nuclear waste. These pools of spent nuclear fuel need to be constantly cooled off with water. And that water needs electricity to circulate. Without humans to maintain the electrical infrastructure, soon nuclear facilities around the world would start losing power. And that would cause a disastrous chain reaction. The water that used to cool down nuclear waste would stop running and begin to boil off. This would expose nuclear waste, causing it to catch fire. All this waste would explode, covering the planet in deadly radioactive chemicals. Ecosystems around the world would start dying from all the radioactivity. And many of these chemicals would remain dangerous for 300 years. And some, like plutonium, would stay radioactive for the next 240,000 years. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Okay, about 1 year after we're gone, nature would begin to reclaim our roads and highways. Moss and fungus would grow everywhere. And when the first winter hit the planet, these roads would start to crumble. All the freezing and thawing would cause water from melted snow to flow into the cracks. In these cracked, vacant streets, new plants would grow. There would be weeds like mustard and shamrock. And in a few more years, grass. In forests poisoned by radiation, there wouldn't be any birds singing this year, but further away from these deadly areas, animal populations would start to boom. There wouldn't be any humans to hunt them or force them out of their natural homes anymore. Without pesticides, insects would reproduce quicker, taking over the globe. This would mean much more food for all kinds of animals, like reptiles and rodents. Okay, fast forwarding a bit, you'd start to see our empty cities undergo major changes. London's Trafalgar Square would be growing young trees. Berlin's Brandenburg Gate would be surrounded by forest. In New York City, a lot would be going on underground. Half a century would have gone by since the last time anyone from a maintenance crew managed any of its 753 subway pumps that prevented rainstorms from flooding the rails. There would now be a network of underground rivers below New York's concrete landscape. Steel columns supporting the streets above would buckle and create waterways through Park Avenue and Wall Street. Your abandoned house and your neighborhood would all be in pretty bad shape. Roofs would leak, nails would rust, buildings would start collapsing. In major cities, streets would be littered with glass falling from decaying skyscrapers. All those skyscrapers would crumple into massive piles of rubble. Despite the city being flooded, New York's Grand Central Station and other stone buildings like it would still be intact. And good news, I guess, all your now worthless money would still be safe and sound in bank vaults that would never be reopened. But famous works of art wouldn't be so lucky. Without climate control and electricity, museum vaults would be less fortunate. Water would leak in and mold would cover everything. Ironically, 1,000-year-old ceramics would continue to survive, just like fossils. 500 years later, a forest would now cover where your home once stood. But buried in the dirt could still be the remains of many of your aluminum appliances and stainless steel cookware. Sadly, you wouldn't be around to cook any good meals with them anymore. With every stretch of black asphalt now overtaken by trees and grasses, temperatures would drop all over the world. The atmosphere would undergo changes as it continues to recover. Without humans, there would be less carbon dioxide in it. The initial boom in animal populations from after our disappearance would stabilize by this point. Predators like wolves would once again roam around Europe hunting in packs. Jumping way ahead into the future, would anything remain of human civilization? Well, you'd still be able to make out the faces of former US presidents in the granite of Mount Rushmore, but don't expect many facial features. A lot of the rock would significantly erode. There would also be some remaining pieces of Egypt's Great Pyramid of Giza and the Great Wall of China. But time wouldn't be kind to them, and both would be barely recognizable versions of the former world wonders. At this point, everything that humans left behind on Earth would be consumed by the sun as it expands and destroys the planet. But if you're worried about humanity disappearing into nothingness, well, there still could be a human footprint to be found. The Voyager space probes would be somewhere out beyond our solar system. Maybe some alien civilization would find them and learn that once upon a time, there was human life on Earth.
Within the vastness of the universe, humanity is not that big of a deal. We're not here because we're meant to be here. We're just here. If mathematical predictions are correct, we might only have 760 years left. What would be the cause of our extinction? What would we do if we knew exactly when our existence would come to an end? And could we delay the inevitable? This is What If, and here's what would happen if we knew the exact time when humanity goes extinct.
1993.
In 1993, knowing that humanity's time on the planet is limited, astrophysicist J. Richard Gott made a very daring prediction using nothing but statistics. Basically, he calculated that there's a 50% chance that the end of human life will come sometime before the year 2779. That gives us 760 years to make our final arrangements and possibly pass the Earth on to a new life form, or even leave the planet to itself altogether. Stick around, and we'll take you on a journey to the future of humanity.
2029. 99942 Apophis approaching the Earth. Calculating chance of collision.
On April 13th, 2029, the near-Earth asteroid named Apophis will pass within 31,000 kilometers of our planet. That's 10 times closer to Earth than the Moon is, and even closer than some satellites in orbit. But this 370-meter wide asteroid won't hit the Earth. Instead, it will sweep by safely and continue its path around the Sun.
2030.
Reproductive technology would allow parents to preview and pick the genetic traits of their future babies. The global population would grow to about 8.5 billion and reach a crisis point. The world's ecosystems would change faster than we've ever seen before due to increased levels of CO2. Up in the Earth's orbit, everything from spent rocket stages to debris from accidental collisions would create a wall of space junk. It would be problematic for any spacecraft to leave the Earth. We'd have to find ways to clean up the upper atmosphere if we didn't want to be trapped on Earth forever. If humanity managed to solve the space junk problem, we'd start establishing the first lunar bases. And that would mark the beginning of the permanent human presence outside of Earth.
2045.
On Earth, the global average temperature would rise by 1.5 degrees, surpassing the safe limit. Even though humanity completely switched to clean energy sources, global warming would become catastrophic and hard to control. Due to warmer global temperatures, the Great Barrier Reef would lose up to 90% of its corals. The Amazon rainforest would largely be destroyed by wildfires and deforestation. Even after decades of conservation efforts, at least 1 million species in the wild would begin to go extinct. This would be the beginning of the next mass extinction event in the Earth's history, although this time it would be caused by humans.
2056.
the Earth's population would grow to 10 billion people. The Earth would become the hottest it's been in the past 3 million years. Extreme weather would rampage around the world. Africa, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia would be most affected by floods, hurricanes, and droughts. Parts of the planet would become uninhabitable, leaving 140 million people no other choice but to seek refuge someplace else.
2080.
Biotechnology implants would become available to the general public, resulting in humans merging with their technology on a biological level. Never-failing artificial organs, synthetic blood, and nanoscale brain interfaces would become a new reality.
2099.
Sea levels would rise upwards of 6 meters, forcing hundreds of millions of people to leave their homes. Large-scale evacuations and resettlement programs would be needed along the coastlines, costing humanity trillions of dollars in the process. Because of the declining fertility rate and the significant number of casualties from environmental conditions, Earth's population would stabilize at 11 billion people.
2180.
By the 2180s, humanity would start expanding into the solar system. Mining asteroids and terraforming Mars would be underway. More people would have access to space technology, and a new form of terrorism would emerge. It would be possible to hijack a spacecraft and use it to redirect asteroids towards the Earth, the Moon, and Mars. The lack of space infrastructure would leave space colonies particularly vulnerable.
2280.
Spaceships powered by antimatter propulsion would take humanity outside the solar system. Automated unmanned probes would be sent to the far regions of the galaxy, researching thousands of interstellar worlds. By the end of the 23rd century, humans would have confirmation of a microbial alien life existing on a warm, wet exoplanet within 100 light-years of our solar system.
2300.
Decades of nanotechnology research and advancement would result in transforming the general public into transhumans or cyborgs. Transhumans would have improved intelligence and strength. Among many superhero traits, they would be able to sprint at very high speeds, become invisible, or even transform their appearances at will.
2500.
Humanity would level up from a Type 0 to a Type 1 civilization on the Kardashev scale. That means humans would be able to harvest all of the Earth's energy and use it to power up their entire civilization. They would already be able to control the weather and global climate, alter the course of earthquakes, and build cities at the bottom of the ocean. The next step would be developing ways to fully manipulate the sun's energy. They might start building space megastructures like a Dyson sphere, or even attempt to feed some of the sun's mass into a black hole.
2779.
The chain of the previous events could lead to humanity completely disappearing from the Earth one way or another. We might end up moving to space colonies we had established. Or it may not even be us anymore, but a new biotechnologically engineered species. Of course, this is a rough timeline, guesstimated by futurists, based on statistics and mathematical models. If you're upset about humanity's coming extinction, remember that it only has a 50% chance of coming true. Scientists calculated our date of extinction using the same formula that marketers use to predict what product you might click on online or who you're going to vote for. It's about probabilities, not guarantees. Besides, other predictions tell us that we would face extinction not 760, but 10,000 years from now. In that case, we'd be around long enough to see the Earth's poles reverse around the year 3500, and computers reaching their ultimate potential sometime after the year 4000. But how would knowing all this in advance change the way we live our lives? Well, If we knew the date of our extinction with 100% accuracy, we could stop caring about our environment and our bodies. We might focus on all the bad habits that only bring us short-term happiness. Our society could become more violent, more self-harming, more inclined to start wars. Or we could team up and try to get off this rock. We could start looking for other places to move to, beyond what our own solar system has to offer. We could establish colonies with stable human populations. Then, even in the event of Earth getting wiped out by some cosmic power, humans would continue to exist. They could carry on until the universe itself collapsed and stopped existing. But that's a story for another What If. "66 million years ago, an asteroid as big as Mount Everest was headed on a deadly collision course with Earth. The impact was so devastating that it wiped out the most gigantic, deadliest reptiles to ever roam our planet. But the dinosaurs didn't just die from one big boom. No. They faced a slow, agonizing end. How did this extinction event cause the largest tsunami Earth has ever seen? And what exactly happened after the big reptiles were gone? Hold on tight, we're taking you on the most epic and deadly trip of your life. This dinosaur-ending asteroid is terrifying. Not only was it about 10 kilometers in diameter, but it also traveled incredibly fast, between 10 and 30 kilometers per second. At this point, it was a blazing fireball. As it hurtled down to Earth, the air in front of it was compressing and heating up to unimaginably hot temperatures. Just before the impact, the asteroid could have been as hot as the surface of the sun. Once it entered our atmosphere, it only took this massive space rock a few seconds to reach Earth's surface and alter the course of life forever. As the asteroid slammed into Earth off the coast of where Mexico is now, it sent huge amounts of debris up into the air. The shocking blast wave killed everything in its way. And from here, it was only getting worse. This powerful blast ejected bits of the Earth's surface into the atmosphere. And minutes later, scorching hot pieces of glass and rock rained back down. Some of the debris reacted with the atmosphere, causing acid rain that would last for years. The land was burning. The fires caused by this devastating impact spread across the continent like literal wildfire, killing more and more life along the way. And then, just when you thought the apocalyptic scenario couldn't get any more intense, well, it did. The impact of the asteroid hitting Earth was so powerful that it sent shockwaves through the planet. And all that energy had to go somewhere. Cue the mega tsunami. A wall of water over 10 meters high raced across the ocean. This wasn't your regular tsunami. It was a staggering 30,000 times more powerful than anything you see today. As this monstrous wave spread across the North Atlantic and South Pacific, coastlines didn't stand a chance. The wave hit with such force that it destroyed and reshaped the continent. If you were there to witness this apocalyptic destruction, well, you wouldn't survive any of it. But some dinosaurs did. Yeah, the ones further away from ground zero weren't immediately obliterated by the impact. They weren't incinerated by the resulting infernos, and they managed to avoid being swept away by the mega tsunami. But still, their fate was sealed. As the dust began to settle, it was the start of a nuclear winter. Even though it wasn't nuclear weapons that caused it, the effect was the same. The massive amount of debris in the air blocked the sunlight for months, maybe even years. Earth suddenly became a cold, dark place, and the dinos weren't ready for it. As temperatures plummeted and fires released enormous amounts of greenhouse gases, the climate changed dramatically. Plants weren't able to perform photosynthesis, and most of them started to die out. This disrupted the food chain and starved many of the animals that survived the impact. And remember the acid rain? It lasted for several years, causing more devastation to the ecosystems. The oceans became too acidic for marine life. Most ocean species didn't have the time to adapt to such a drastic change. These prolonged harsh conditions, together with the initial blast, pushed about 75% of Earth's life to extinction. The good news is that this included the horrifying T-Rex. Yeah, as much as I feel bad for this guy, I'm happy he's not running around today. When the last of the dinosaurs breathed their last breath, Earth became an empty, devastated place, cold and acidic. So when did things get back to normal? Yeah, well, here's the thing. They didn't. Not dinosaur-era normal, anyway. Earth didn't rebuild after that. It reinvented itself. 1,000 years later, the planet was recovering from the post-apocalyptic winter. It was still cold and food was still scarce, but life was ready to make a comeback. In this new wild world, a few furry little critters were sprinting around. Among the first plants to reappear after the impact were ferns. They really hit it off well after the disaster. 100,000 years later, Earth began to get a little more lively. Creatures about the size of raccoons were repopulating the continents. And the oceans were once again teeming with life. Fast forward about 10 million years, and Earth had finally restored its biodiversity. Only it wasn't the same Earth as it used to be. Now it was the age of mammals. Yeah, after the dinosaurs checked out, mammals were on fire. Yeah, not literally, of course. Mammals, together with birds and flowering plants, were rocking the planet.